Hello everyone and welcome to Build Fix, episode number 3 for May 2024. This is my monthly series where viewers like you provide parts lists to me, and then I provide constructive feedback, constructive criticism, perhaps ways to get more performance for less money. This series is proudly sponsored by PCPartPicker, but this month we have a new threat looming on the horizon, the threat of new hardware launching soon. Excellent! Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. A quick explanation of how this works. At the beginning of every month, within the first week or so, I will post a community post where I will ask for you to submit your parts lists. I also threw a survey in there, and in case you guys are wondering, after just shy of 3,000 votes, the winner is peach, narrowly edging out banana and cherry, pineapple coming in dead last. Maybe I should have turned it upside down. But everything from this month was taken from these replies. A lot of the replies had builds that were totally good and fine and good to go, but I did select a few that I thought could use some constructive criticism. And we're gonna start off with a couple upgrade lists. The first one comes from Nembesis, who's actually over in the UK. So this reminds me immediately of Snatch. Do you know what Nembesis means? More to the point though, we're talking about a pretty old computer, or relatively old, 2017. So we're looking at about 7+ years old. And I'm very glad to hear that this was put together using my build guides with the first 2 paychecks after passing apprenticeship. It's held up really well, but starting to show its age, mostly for CPU throttling. Spectre and Meltdown patches took away some performance. Since we're talking about the UK, and PCPartPicker does have regional prices for the UK and a bunch of other places around the world, but we're trying to stick to a £1,000 budget and possibly a decent GPU later down the line. PC is used for everything, including running test VMs and containers, online exams, gaming, music recording, and editing. So we're looking at very multi-purpose. We're not just focusing on gaming. And I absolutely feel you about PC building becoming a lot harder since getting a mortgage. So here is the list that we are looking at: an LGA 1151 platform build with an Intel Core i5-7600K. Note that since some of these parts are much older, they're not available for sale anymore, so prices aren't currently listed. So like the total price down here is not necessarily accurate to the parts that this system was built with. But my first impression of this build, running down the list, was like, this is a really solid build for 2017 with that 7600K, a nice solid 16 gig DDR4 allocation. We have multiple storage drives here, including an old mechanical spinning hard drive, a SATA SSD, a couple SATA SSDs, and even an NVMe SSD. The GPU is a GTX 1080 8 gig, case is a Corsair Crystal 570X. We have an 850 watt, 80+ gold rated power supply, nice set of fans, and a 4K monitor that's a good 4K monitor, but also only 60 Hz, so not ideal for gaming. So since we're looking at this as an upgrade, I would tell you the same thing I'd probably tell most people with a system that's 7 or 8+ years old, who's looking to upgrade or build a new system, and that is, you're gonna need to gut it. So let's go ahead and edit this parts list so I can choose what to gut. Obviously the oldest hardware that's in here, CPU, motherboard, memory, we're gonna need to clear all that out. When it comes to your storage, we have 5 storage drives, and a lot of systems that get upgraded over time might end up with a storage configuration like this. I'm guessing that you maybe started with some of the lower capacity drives and then maybe added other drives as time went by. And it's totally fine to take even smaller drives and just carry them over to the new system, especially SATA drives, because chances are you're gonna have at least like 6 serial ATA ports to connect them to. Whereas NVMe drives require an M.2 slot on the motherboard, and there you're probably gonna have maybe 2 on your motherboard, as many as 3 or 4. So really the question is, are we gonna carry any of these drives over to the new system, or are we just gonna ditch them all? And do note that with spinning 3.5-inch drives, as well as serial ATA 2.5-inch drives, and even M.2 drives, you can get external enclosures that you can put those drives in, and then you just plug them in via USB, so you can still use them or make further use of them as an external drive that you can use to transfer data between systems. So that is what I'd recommend you do with probably most of these drives, or just make that call whether you want to make it an external drive or install it into the system. So keep those solutions in mind, and for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to leave this SanDisk 1 terabyte SATA drive. So here is the gutted system with the parts that I think you could still carry over. We have a 280mm all-in-one liquid cooler, which is on the fence, honestly, for me. This is a good all-in-one liquid cooler. You could probably contact NZXT to get an AM5 bracket for it, because since it's a standard Ace Tech pump, the AM5 brackets are pretty easy to drop in. But if we are talking about an AIO that's been in use for 6 or 7+ years, I would start to get a little dubious about its long-term viability and the chance of the pump failing at some point. So I'm gonna leave that call up to you, whether you wanna continue using this or swap out to something like a $40 to $60 air cooler, as I'll be recommending later in the video. The remaining parts here, I think you can still continue to use. Your GPU, you said you might upgrade down the line, which you definitely should, but a GTX 1080 8GB will continue to get you by for now. We also have some solid infrastructure in your build that we're gonna leave in place. The Corsair Crystal 570X, totally fine for a case. Your power supply, you're totally good with 850 watts, 80+ gold. You got some nice RGB fans in there that, you probably don't want to get rid of those too, so stick with that. You got good airflow. And then your monitor as well, I'd recommend possibly upgrading down the line along with your graphics card. And beyond that, we're gonna upgrade you to AM5. I'm gonna choose a motherboard first, because that will align the compatibility with the motherboard, so we'll have the same socket and memory standard and everything. So I've just chosen AM5 motherboards, ATX motherboards. I'm sorting by lowest price. We are working with Great British Pounds. From there, I'll start with the less expensive motherboards to try to find something that is a good combination of quality and price. And we do have some good options. The Gigabyte B650 Aorus Elite AX V2 is $175. Fortunately, there are quite a few options in the 170 to 200 pound or dollar range. B650 boards are just fine. You can go with an X670 motherboard if you want more I/O. And I'm gonna go with the MSI Mag B650 Tomahawk Wi-Fi, which has Wi-Fi, good solid power delivery for upgraded CPUs down the line. It has 3 M.2 slots, a couple of them with heat sinks. From there, we'll choose a CPU. Since the compatibility filter is on, it's only gonna show us AM5 compatible CPUs that will work with this motherboard. Now, the clear choice, and one you've probably seen me recommend quite a few times if you're going all out gaming, is the 7800X 3D, which is currently 331 GB. But Nembesis mentioned doing lots of other things with this system, like running VMs or getting into like music recording and editing. So for that, we might want more than 8 cores and 16 threads. For just a few bucks more than the 7800X 3D, we have a couple solid options. The 7900X isn't gonna be as good as gaming. It's actually gonna be a little bit of a downgrade on the gaming side, but it's only 10 pounds more. If you wanna go for the highest end CPU on this platform, that's 533 pounds. That's the 7950X 3D. This is going to be the best in terms of the most cores and threads, and it's also going to be really solid for gaming, right up there with the 7800X 3D. Then going back to my vague, ominous warning from the intro, we have new AM5 CPUs launching later this year. They're probably going to be announced in about a month at Computex, and they'll probably be launching anywhere from June to September. And anyone who's building a new PC or doing a significant upgrade is probably gonna have that in mind. What if I spend money on hardware right now, and then in a few weeks or a month or 2 months, new faster hardware comes out and I should have waited and bought that instead? For that reason, and because we're fairly sure that these announcements are coming very soon, it might be worth your while to wait just a little bit, about a month or so, to see how that plays out and to see when the expected launch dates are. But keeping that in mind, keeping your budget in mind, and keeping your intended use for the system in mind, I'm going to make the perhaps somewhat controversial choice of saying, let's go with the 7900X 3D. Do note the warning that pops up, because if you're getting an older version of this motherboard, it will need a BIOS update. Fortunately, this motherboard has USB BIOS flashback, so you can update the BIOS if needed, even if you don't have an older CPU that's compatible. But okay, beyond that, we just need a DDR5 memory kit. The sweet spot for AMD's 7000 series CPUs is DDR5 6000 for the speed. And since you mentioned, again, doing more stuff than just gaming with the system, I'm gonna recommend a 2x16 gig kit. You could get by with 2x8 gig, but I would say go for more memory if you have that option. So with those filters in place, we can look at the memory that's available. It's looking like we're gonna be spending about 100 pounds. And then from there, I would just choose the kit that matches the aesthetic of the rest of your build. Whether or not you want RGB, you might have to spend a little bit more on that. But more practically than looking at what the memory looks like, I would look at the cast latency and the first word latency, and lower is better here. So just looking at this memory down here in the 100 pound range, I would say the Lexar Thor with the CL32 kit. This is called King Bank. I have never heard of this memory manufacturer before. Interesting. Is this something that's only available in the UK? I don't know. I'm not gonna like recommend you get this memory, but it does have slightly better specs for roughly the same price. With PC hardware, if you are dealing with like a brand new manufacturer or one you've never heard of before, sometimes you can get a good deal and get hardware that works just fine. But sometimes you can also get something that's just really cheaply made and actually doesn't work to its rated speed. Anyway, I've worked with the Lexar Thor memory before, so I'm gonna go ahead and choose that. And lastly, we'll bring the storage up to speed by adding, let's say, a 2 terabyte NVMe. So here we're just looking at SSDs that are 1800, 2 terabytes or bigger. Sorting by the price per gigabyte, that will show us good deals on higher capacity drives as well, in case there's some good priced 4 terabyte drives down here. Oh, I'm also sorry. I meant to click that twice. All right, now we're sorting by the lowest price per gigabyte and not the highest price per gigabyte. But also we're looking at right now a mix of M.2 NVMe drives and SATA drives. If we change the form factor to M.2 2280, that should give us at least M.2 form factor drives. We might still see some SATA drives in here. And mostly we're looking for the capacity of 2 terabytes and an M.2 drive that's at least PCI Express 3.0. And if we scroll down to drives that are a little bit pricier, we could find some drives that are a little bit faster. And faster drives can be helpful if you're doing a lot of video editing, for example. You didn't specifically mention video editing though, so I think we can get away with something that's a little bit more to the budget side. The Kingston NV2 is a solid choice. Budget drive, not the fastest in terms of NVMe SSD speeds, but it keeps the price down to less than 100 British pounds. So the combined price for the upgrade items, which is going to be the CPU, the motherboard, the memory, and the SSD, is $770, which is less than the $1,000 that you were intending to possibly spend. Of course, that does leave some overlap for the eventual upgrade of the graphics card and the monitor. And that is going to be a huge improvement over the existing system that you're using on LGA 1151. And since you're upgrading to AM5, you will have an upgrade path in the future once those AMD 9000 series CPUs launch sometime later this summer. All right, moving on to our next upgrade request from OnarTheMage. Paul, I want to upgrade my rig. It is for gaming and content viewing, so streaming services. So mostly gaming is a focus here. I want storage for faster, more reliable speeds. Hard drive is currently a chugger, and they maybe want fewer devices to store Steam library and other stuff like that. They play at 1440. They have 2 monitors, and they want to sell the ROG one in order to upgrade to a 4K TV. I mainly play World of Warcraft, want a 7900 GRE, 7900 XT, or whatever Blackwell or RDNA 4 offers. And we have a budget of $500 to $700. All right, so here's the parts list that was sent over. We have a 5800X 3D with an Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 280mm liquid cooler, the ASUS TUF B550 motherboard, that's a solid choice, a 32 gig G.Skill Trident Z memory kit, DDR4 3600, that's good too. Once again, a storage configuration that's a bit scattered with a 1 terabyte 2.5 inch, a 5 terabyte mechanical hard drive, a 1 terabyte M.2 NVMe, and a 2 terabyte M.2 NVMe. Then we have the venerable GTX 1080 Ti for graphics, Lian Li LAN cool case, that's solid too. A lot of good choices made with this initial build. The Corsair RM850X power supply, also 850 watts, 80 plus gold. And then the combo of these 2 monitors, a TUF Gaming 2560 by 1440 170 Hz, and this ROG, which is pretty much the same specs. So since this is an upgrade build, it only is gonna require, I think, some very slight tweaks. But there's also a big reason I chose this build for today's theme, and that is for anyone who is currently on AM4, who's looking at like the AM5 stuff and the next gen stuff launching in the summer and thinking to themselves like, what do I do? Is AM4 still good enough? The answer is yes, AM4 is totally still good, and you don't need to fall into the race of like trying to claw your way up to like the latest and newest hardware. Keep using the hardware that you already have, especially if it's still a totally viable platform like AM4. And also especially if you're using pretty much the best CPU for gaming on this platform, which is the 5800X3D. 5700X3D is also totally good in this range. But I get a lot of people who ask me, Paul, like, how should I upgrade my system? What new hardware should I get? And sometimes the answer is, you're fine. You're totally good, at least with the core components here. CPU is good. You have a solid liquid cooler that I might not have chosen right out of the gate if you're building new to pair with the 5800X3D, but that said, you've already got it, it's totally good. A nice motherboard reminding us back when like the mid-range motherboards that you could get for 130 or 140 bucks were totally solid, which isn't necessarily the case anymore on AM5, but at least it makes us feel slightly nostalgic. A 32 gig memory kit of the right speed, there's nowhere really to go from here. Yes, there are faster memory kits out there, but the performance improvements realistically, like with gaming, is gonna be minimal. This is B B550 plus Wi-Fi 2. This other picture is B550M plus Wi-Fi 2. This is supposed to be ATX. All right, the Amazon listing has the wrong pictures associated. That's fine. I'm just double checking your M.2 slots. We have one here with a heatsink, two down here with a second heatsink, two M.2 slots. And we already have two M.2 NVMe drives, so both slots are populated. You have a 3 terabyte storage configuration, that's fine. Likewise with 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, there's usually plenty of room in the case for those, and there's usually plenty of SATA ports on a motherboard, because most motherboards have at least 6 SATA ports, so that should be fine to keep in there as well. But I totally feel you if you're getting tired of having that spinning mechanical drive in there. So I'll give you the same recommendation I gave Nembesis. I don't like to sell old drives, SSDs or spinning mechanical hard drives. I either like to reuse them or destroy them. But if you have older drives in your system that are either lower capacity or like spinning mechanical hard drives that are just too slow and that make noise and that take time to spin up and everything, consider switching them over to external enclosures. External enclosures are often relatively cheap, and they give you the option to plug something in via USB to access the data on it. I'll say especially for spinning mechanical drives, if you need some offline storage that you want to drop a bunch of like your pictures or stuff that can't be easily recovered, having an offline backup is great peace of mind. Like if your house is burning down, you can just grab a mechanical hard drive and run out with it to try to save some of your precious data. And I know that's a bit of an extreme scenario, but the point is, external enclosures are really useful. There are lots of them available. They're inexpensive, and there are like slim ones like this that fit M.2 drives that just pop in, and then you have larger enclosures for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch SATA drives like SATA SSDs and mechanical hard drives. So that is what you should do with your 5 terabyte drive. Get rid of that. And I guess since it was requested, we will remove these other drives as well so that we can have more consolidated internal storage. And the most viable capacity, I think, for your purposes is going to be a 4 terabyte drive. So looking at 3 terabytes and higher SSDs, M.2 2280, that can drop into that slot that we freed up by removing your 1 terabyte NVMe SSD. We got the Silicon Power UD90. That is the cheapest one at $220. Team Group MP34, I've used that as well. And just like in the first build, these cheaper SSDs are not the fastest. They often don't have a dedicated cache. They use part of their NAND flash as a cache, which is fine and won't affect your gaming performance at all. It might affect the gaming load times by like a couple seconds, but not really that much. I did the Team Group MP34 last time, so let's go with the Silicon Power. We're also going to remove the ROG monitor since you're planning to sell that. And we're gonna upgrade your graphics card. Although the 1080 Ti, venerable, like long-term stalwart champion of PC gaming, but you have a 5800X3D, and that could easily power up to some of the highest end GPUs that are still currently on the market without losing too much performance versus something like a 7800X3D. And I think the GPU that aligns most nicely with the rest of your hardware is going to be the 4070 Super. Possibly the 4070 Ti Super, although those aren't always as competitively priced. And you know what's nice is we can just choose both, sort by price, and then we can see that 4070 Supers are now available below $600. The cheapest is $585 right now. And then if we look at the card and we just scroll down, then we can see what's the cheapest 4070 Ti Super. It's a pretty big bump up. It's up to $790. So I'd stick with that. And you could just go with the cheapest one. All of these are going to perform within like a pretty 1 or 2 or 3% of each other, and you can overclock them as well if you want to. Zotacs do a good job, so let's choose this one. All right, so we fixed the SSD situation and we got a upgraded graphics card. Of course, the 7900 GRE or the 7900 XT would totally be good choices as well. But the other reason I brought up this build is because here's someone who's also looking at the potential GPU launches coming up later this year and considering Blackwell, the RTX 50 series that NVIDIA probably has in the works, and there's lots of rumors going around about that right now. That said, whereas with the AMD CPUs that are launching, we have a pretty fair expectation that they're going to be announced in June, probably available within 1 to 3 months after that. The NVIDIA graphics cards might also be announced at Computex or announced within a month or 2 after that. But even if NVIDIA launches those RTX 50 series GPUs, there's a good chance that they're only going to launch the RTX 5090 or the top tier one right out of the gate. And then there's also a good chance, since NVIDIA is also producing a lot of AI GPUs right now, that they might have really limited availability for those RTX 50 series class graphics cards when they first launch. So the possibility of obtaining one of those those very soon or holding off for an upgrade to one of those right now is a little bit more dubious in my opinion. It's probably going to be a little bit further down the line later this year or even next year before RTX 50 series is actually widely available, or models that are more reasonable versus like the top end $2,000 plus one becomes available to the general public. So because of that, we're sticking to pretty modest upgrades for your system overall and sticking with a lot of your original stuff. We have upgraded your SSD configuration so you have fewer drives in the system, and we've got you a really nice solid GPU upgrade, and you're gonna notice a huge difference from the 1080 Ti to the 4070 Super. Beyond that, you're working with some really good hardware, so good choices, and again, don't feel bad sticking with AM4 for now. Give it another year or two, I'd say, before you consider upgrading from this platform. Moving on to the new system builds, our next request is from Anthony Goody4956. Hey Paul, I'm building my first gaming PC that will be used exclusively for gaming. We'll be connecting it to a 65-inch LG CX OLED TV, 4K 120Hz. I have about $3 grand to spend. I selected a lot of ProArt products, which is an ASUS sub-brand that looks really nice because of the black and gold theme. Yeah, they do have really nice black and gold themed stuff. I'm open to any suggestions you think would work better, wondering your thoughts on gaming on a TV. So first off, gaming on a TV, especially an OLED like the LG CX line that has support for variable refresh rate, 120Hz refresh rate, really good solid gaming experience. Especially if you do a lot of couch gaming, gaming with either like a wireless keyboard and mouse or like a controller. We've been super happy with that experience because that's actually I think pretty much this exact same TV that we have out in our living room. So a good choice there, and let's look at the parts you've chosen for your upcoming computer. Starting with the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is like the go-to right now if you can afford around $300 to $400 for a CPU. That's the one you should go for. We're pairing it with a $270 ASUS ProArt 420mm all-in-one liquid cooler. You might notice the inflection in my voice changing a little bit here. We're spending more on the all-in-one liquid cooler than you are on your motherboard, but we are sticking with the theme. That's ASUS ProArt. We've got an ASUS ProArt B650 Creator ATX AM5 motherboard, which is actually a reasonable price. That's $230, that's good. A 32 gig DDR5 6000 memory kit from Team Group. Fine there as well. The 4TB MP34, we looked at that just a second ago, although I chose the one that was $6 cheaper, but that's a good choice too. Good bang for the buck for 4 terabytes of pretty fast NVMe storage. Then we continue with the ProArt stuff. ASUS ProArt RTX 4080 Super for $1,130. A $270 ProArt PA602 case. Then we got a Super Flower 850 watt 80 plus gold power supply and an actual Windows license. Total build cost currently $2,824. And let me just say, you must be pretty heavily invested in the ASUS ProArt aesthetic. I found this to be interesting because I often see people put together builds where they're really heavily invested in like RGB and they have like $200 or $300 in like RGB fans everywhere. And this is kind of going the other way with it. The ASUS ProArt lineup is very subtle. It's very classy. We looked at the ASUS ProArt PA602 at CES this year, and it's a beautiful looking case. It is also a $270 case, and there are absolutely some less expensive options out there that will functionally do the same thing. So I will say this, because we are working with pretty much the top gaming CPU that's out there, and because we have a graphics card that is not the top GPU available, but it's at least the top reasonably priced GPU available, since the 4080 Supers are usually around $1,000. But if you're maxing out those two slots, then spending more money on aesthetics in other categories becomes more acceptable for me. However, I couldn't help but think how much cheaper we could make an equivalently performing system if we just ditch the ProArt stuff. Absolutely the most egregious to me is this cooler because it's $270. It's a huge 420mm AIO, and yes, it fits in the case. And it matches with the aesthetic, but it is super overkill for this CPU. This CPU, liquid cooler, like it's okay. It's okay to go with the liquid cooler. You can get away with an air cooler as well. But the first thing I've done is stripped out all those ProArt components except for the motherboard, because I feel like the motherboard is still reasonably priced. That drops the price a lot to about $1,000, but keep in mind, we don't have a video card. So let's start with that. Look, we have a less than $1,000 4080 Super now too. Look at these $10 price breaks on $1,000 cards. And I guess that is thanks to a promo code as well. But look, it's the PNY Verto OC, which has a triple fan cooler and no like lighting or anything. I would say that's a nice subtle look that would blend somewhat with sort of a ProArt type aesthetic. For the CPU cooler, we could save around like $220 or $230 by going with something like a Thermalright Peerless Assassin or the Phantom Spirit. I would opt for the Phantom Spirit between the two of those because it's slightly newer. But it's kind of become a theme that in these videos I tell people don't go with the AIO, go with an air cooler instead. So I'm gonna even stick with an air cooler for you. I was just gonna choose a reasonably priced Arctic cooler because they have a really good combination of like performance and good pricing. And it's hilarious because their Liquid Freezer 2420, which also has a massive 420mm radiator, is among their least expensive options, coming in at about $92 or $93. That said, while this would fit in your case that you've chosen, I kind of don't want to go with that case anymore. So again, we'll try to keep the price down, and I mean, it's going to involve having to spend some money on RGB, but you know what? You can turn the RGB lights off if you want. And you know, if you want to stick with the black and gold aesthetic, this is another brand I've never heard of before. It's called Geometric Future. Okay. Cases are super subjective. There's lots of options in the $80 to $150 range that would fit the hardware you're going with and give you plenty of airflow. But I think Be Quiet's lineup is probably kind of the most similar to that ASUS ProArt aesthetic in terms of, as far as being a little bit more subtle with the design, but also having like really quiet performance options. The Pure Base 600 would probably be a good choice. For around $100 though, the Shadow Base 800 is available for $110. That is with the tempered glass side panel window too, so that'll look nice. Okay, so here's the fixed build. Same CPU, a slightly different cooler, which was way less expensive. Same motherboard, memory, SSD. We have a cheaper 4080 Super. A less expensive but still very nice case, and that same power supply. Operating system as well I have left out, simply because with Windows 11 you can either install it and not activate it and run it as is to save some money that way, or there are plenty of options for purchasing Windows 11 keys that you have to spend a lot less money than buying it at retail for over $100. With all that tallied up though, we are saving you around $600. Right now coming in about $2,214 versus the original build, which was $2,824. So that's the question I leave you with. Is $600 worth it for matching ASUS ProArt hardware? In my opinion, no. Our final build to fix is a new build from Loot Junior. I want to build a completely new PC. I want it to be good for gaming and game development, like Unity, Unreal, Blender, etc. But I also want to save as much money as I reasonably can. So as always, looking for that nice mix between bang and buck. Budget is as high as I'm comfortable with. Right now they're gaming at 1440, but they want to go with 4K eventually. And again, sticking with today's theme, no matter what you say with this build, I will still wait until after Computex before I order anything. And yes, as many of you should keep in mind, if you're watching this video and you're thinking about buying parts right now, it might be worth your while to wait a month or so until after Computex to hear the announcements that come out then. But as I also mentioned previously, if you're holding out for an RTX 50 series card, I would not anticipate those being widely available soon. It is still okay to wait for those, but you might be waiting a little bit longer than you are for the new AM5 CPUs. All right, let's take a look at the build. We have yet again a 7800X3D, because that is just the solid choice right now, paired with a very reasonable cooler, the Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo. And notably, Thermalright has realized, hey, this is getting a lot of good feedback and good hype, so let's raise the price a little bit. These used to be like closer to 40, or they were like $43 or $44. Now they're 50. That's too bad. I wish they were still a little bit cheaper, but it's still a good price. Motherboard, we got the MSI Mag X670E. I like this board because it's X670E, so it has that double chipset for more I/O, and it's still not like super cheap, but $260 isn't insane. You also have a nice memory kit with this Trident Z5. It's a 2x32 gig kit. DDR5 6400 is good speed, and it's even CL32 with 10 nanoseconds first word latency, which is pretty tight timings. We have a beastly storage configuration with the 990 Pro 2TB, which is a really fast PCIe 4.0 drive, and then the Lexar NM790 for 4TB additional. This is another build that as I was going down it, I was very on the fence as to whether or not to include it, because it doesn't need a whole lot of tweaking. Here's the main thing that I think we have a miss on, which is the graphics card. We have an RTX 4080, which used to be a good price for a 4080, less than $1,200, but now there's the 4080 Super, and you should be able to get that for less than $1,000, so I can at least save you some cash there. Finishing off, we have the Fractal Design North XL. This is a bit more of an expensive case, but it's really well reviewed recently because it has really nice performance in terms of airflow, and they put wood on it, so it's got a unique look. It's well designed. I like fractal cases, I will not attempt to dissuade you there. We have a high-end power supply, PCIe 5.0 compatible MSI A1000G, 1000 watts, 80 plus gold certified. This is maybe a little bit overkill. You could probably get away with a little bit less wattage than this. That said, the price is not insane, and we're talking about a pretty high-end build here, so this will give you like more breathing room in the future if you perhaps upgrade to like a 9000 series 16-core CPU or something like that. It's gonna draw a lot more power. And then we've got that MSI Optics 1440 165 Hz monitor. So kind of in the same way that I brought up that AM4 build to let you guys know, for anyone who's on AM4 or thinking about an AM4 upgrade, that you're totally fine and you don't need to worry about clawing your way up to AM5. Similarly, anyone who is on AM5 right now and maybe thinking about an AM5 build can remain confident that the 7800X3D is a really good choice right now, but you might have that next tier up CPU coming out in the next couple months that it might be worth holding out for. That said, what AMD has done with the previous generations for the 5000 series and 7000 series is the X3D models haven't been available right out of the gate, and we're not really sure with the 9000 series if they're going to do that and say here's the X3D from the get-go, or if they're going to launch the non-X3D CPUs first, let those percolate for a few months, and then come out with the X3D CPUs down the line, probably towards the end of the year. But you're already apparently planning on doing the right thing, which is not buying any of this stuff right now and waiting at least a month to see what those AMD announcements are and see when the launch dates are coming and see which CPUs they're actually promising to launch sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, that makes my job a little bit easier for this last build. Last month, the final build was just an RTX 4090, and then I built the rest of the system around it. Now I feel like we have the rest of the system all laid out. We're just gonna choose a video card, and we're just gonna go with the 4080 Super. 4090, I mean, obviously would be a really nice upgrade there too, but you're probably gonna spend twice as much, closer to 2,000 on that. Just don't get the RTX 4080 unless you find one for like 800 bucks or something. And here again, the PNY Verto OC would be perfectly fine to drop in there for less than $1,000. I feel like Zotac's Gaming Trinity, since it's all white, wouldn't really match very well. So my inclination would be just to, choose that one again. That's what I'm gonna do. I was thinking about the MSI one there, but you know what? Why not save a few more dollars? Also, notably, the Fractal Design case has a closed side panel, so you're not really going to see it much either. So this build is all about the performance of the hardware inside, and it's going to still look nice and subtle on the outside. And we managed to scrape $100 off the total cost, bringing it down to less than $3,000. But I feel like Loot Junior was being a little bit more like existential, asking like, am I on the right track? And am I doing the right thing to wait for those AM5 announcements in June? And the answer is yes, you are, and yes, you should, but just don't buy an RTX 4080 right now, get the 4080 Super. But that is gonna wrap it up for Build Fix episode number 3. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the thumbs up button and check the video description down below. I'll post links to the PCPartPicker lists that were sent over, as well as my upgrade suggestions. If you would like to participate in the next episode, keep an eye out for my community post, which is probably going to go up in the last week of May, since I will be leaving for Computex, so I'm probably going to do that one a little bit earlier than usual. But if you would like to be appraised of when those community posts go live or when my videos go live in general, then definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, because that's the best way to do that. A huge thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series, and a closing reminder to check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. Thanks again for watching this video, you guys, and we'll see you all in the next one.